technical support, professional support, so that the budget, the estimates committee can meet and deliver what is expected of them. Uh, I think in 91, 92, the government, the finance division set up a committee to look into the budget and make some recommendations for improving the budget and the accountability systems of the government. The committee recommended this medium-term budgetary framework, which was basically to relate budget to the macroeconomic conditions and ask the budget to do the basic economic task that the budget is expected to do, which is maintain stability of the economic system and also to contribute to growth and development. The medium term was taken. The medium term is defined either as 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, depending on how you want to do it. So you set a target and you also provide the resources for achieving those targets. Having done that, you ask the ministry that this is the money you have. You are free to exercise your judgment to achieve the goals that you have committed yourself to do, and this commitment is to the parliament. I don't know if that has been done, and I guess there was also some suggestion that a more focused and more intensive audit should be extended to those areas of government functions which get emphasis in government's policy and which get large allocations. By and large, these two things overlap, because if the government thinks that the education is very important, or energy is very important, or certain infrastructure that remove transportation bottlenecks are important, automatically there is more allocation for those things. Now, this is important, as Comptroller General have said and many others have said, that the government's expenditure have increased. Now, if the expenditure is not done in an efficient manner, you might be spending more money, but you do not get the result. So with more expenditure, it becomes more necessary that it is done more intelligently and more efficiently. The intelligence starts from accepting the proposal to spend some money, designing the project or designing the scheme for expenditure, picking up the technology for implementation of the project. So it involves quite a lot of things. Tax revenue also has increased, and I think audit of tax has become very important. I do not know how intensively or how extensively the tax is audited. Back in the early 90s, when I was chairman board of revenue, we had an ongoing dispute with the audit office. The audit office made out a case that tax should be audited by them, and the tax officers said that tax cannot be audited because the books are confidential, it cannot be open to anyone. The tax law had that the constitution provides for auditors to audit, the auditor general to audit taxes. The audit law has a provision that if the audit department wants to do taxation, the auditor general would have access to the book. So there is a bit of gap. I am not exactly conflict, but a gap between what the constitution says and what the law says. It is true that the data about a taxpayer's tax-related information is confidential and is a privileged information to the tax official. But to the extent it involves government interest, it is not confidential, and it is not something that cannot be disclosed to a responsible auditor. Maybe it ought to be given to persons in the audit who are responsible enough to maintain that confidentiality which is assured to the taxpayer by law. In one of my recent visits, I did went to this National Audit Office of Britain and tried to learn from them how do they carry on their tax of their audit of tax. What I learned from them is they check how much could be collected as a tax and how much is actually collected, what is the gap, but they do not go to the extent of suggesting how improvement can be made. It is perhaps because they do not have enough information about how the system works and therefore they do not go to that extent. They leave it to the agency concerned and after some time they go back and see whether any improvement has been made. But what was more interesting and what you may not like, those who are in the audit cadre or the permanent service of the audit department, they do not have any permanent cadres. What they do, they follow the same practice at the audit, at the accounting companies. They take people on training, they pay for the training, and they go to the institutions where training is imparted. They work with them for 6 to 10 years, and then when they decide that they would no longer work for the organization, they say, I would leave, and they go to some private audit firm and work there. And according to the NAO, it pays them well because while they are apprenticed, their remuneration is very low. But because they acquire this skill, when they go out, they get a higher salary. So in terms of a lifelong income, they have a better prospect and they suffer a bit in the beginning so that they can earn a lot afterwards. The advantage of that is specialization. Some people can pick up a specialization and learn that. Maybe we have a disadvantage in the sense that the same people would audit expenditure, then at some point in time they would be allocated to audit taxation and they may not have learned enough about taxation. The taxation becomes more difficult also for the reason that tax calculation has to follow certain principles which are transparent and clearly understood by the taxpayer and the tax collector. If there is not adequate transparency in the rule, then the taxpayer feels that he is being subject to pressure, and the boss of the tax collector can always say that you have not collected enough tax. So the rules should be very clearly defined. Unfortunately, our income tax, particularly VAT, there's a lot of fuzziness in the procedures and the methods of collection, which kind of motivates the fellow to understate his income and the collector to overstate the payable taxes. In the result, there is not enough cooperation, and unless there is cooperation between those who are in business and those who collect taxes, it is always a problem to get enough tax. Now about the public accounts officer, as a joint secretary in the finance division and also later on, I tried to find if there is any government statement on what is a principal accounts officer. I have never been able to find any reliable statement, adequate statement of what is a principal accounting officer. If you have been able to find one, you should circulate it. What is a principal accounting officer? Yeah, when was that manual prepared? Anyway, so the principal accounting officer was given responsibility for ensuring that the purpose for which the allocation is made, the actual utilization correspond with the purpose for which it is given. But sometimes the public accounts officer interprets it a little more. For instance, in Public Works Department, the old Works Accounts Code made the chief of the department responsible for controlling the expenditure. But the Public Accounts Officer sometimes takes over the control, and by issuing a circular that your power is limited to X thousand, he virtually takes over control that is given or ought to be given, I feel, to the chief of the department. But there's another anomaly. If I am not mistaken, this public accounts officer was given responsibility, and there is some explanation for it in Ivor Jennings' book, The Cabinet Government. This was meant to give program responsibility and financial responsibility to the same person. So the secretary is responsible for the program of the ministry. He is responsible also for the expenditure of the ministry. When these two are separated, the public accounts officer cannot act with effectiveness and the program manager cannot act with effectiveness.